So today, as we're talking about emulation, you can see Jack starting to use emulation in some of his poems. He really liked Walter Dean Meyer's poems, and so he wanted to write one that was like that, but he was worried that he would feel like he had copied his poem and that this emulation was plagiarism, and it's not. And so he said he's very glad to hear that Mr. Walter Dean Myers is not the sort of person who would get mad at a boy for using some of his words. And he gave him credit, inspired by Walter Dean Myers. So he's not saying this is my poem and I came up with it completely on my own. Sometimes when we get to emulation, people are a little worried about plagiarism. It's not plagiarizing, it's just a way we learn. So let's talk a little bit about the purpose of emulation. Emulation is imitation with the intent to match or exceed a person or achievement. So think about a basketball coach or a soccer coach, volleyball. When they're trying to teach you a new skill, they don't just stand off to the side and say, here's how you should do it. No, not like this. They don't just tell you what to do. They show you, and they show you where your hands should be and where your arms should be and where your feet should be. And they model it with you, and then you try it. And so they're looking at each of those elements. Well, what does it take to spike the volleyball really well? What are all of the elements? And then they show you. We do the same thing with poetry. We look at a poem and we look at all of the elements, the similes, the metaphors, the lining, and we think about what that author did, and then we use those same strategies in ours. And so that's what emulation does. So it means that we have the ability to notice distinct craft choices like similes, metaphor, personification, lining, repetition, and consider how we might use it in our own writing. Is it cheating? A lot of times, especially since we finished the research paper, people are worried about plagiarism. You're not claiming this as a work that is entirely your own. You're giving the author credit. And just like Jack said, inspired by Walter Dean Myers, we'll do the same sort of thing. Are you being deceptive? No. I'm asking you to do this and telling you yours is going to look like this, and that's okay. And then are you copying? You're not copying word for word, but you're borrowing ideas, phrases, structure with the intent of using it as practice and not your own original work. So here's why we emulate. So if we try and come up with something all by ourselves, we're going to be down here. But then when we check out somebody else's poems and what they did, we get some ideas. And then we're able to try it in our own. And that's that thoughtful imitation, that's the emulation. But then once you learn that skill, eventually you will be able to do it on your own. You'll use those skills, those strategies, creating your own original poems that are not emulations after a while. So how do we do this? We read the author's work and we look for style choices. We're going to be doing that today. We identify the style choices the author makes, and then we start that thoughtful emulation. So we might write, you might talk to other people. We look back at that original writing, and so we're going to practice that today with a poem called Foul Shot.